Breaking news mga kabayan, sa isinagawang Manila Dialogue sa South China Sea 2025, hindi maiwasang magkaroon ng salungatan sa mga pahayag ng mga representante ng China at mga delegado mula sa Vietnam, Indonesia, lalong-lalo na sa Pilipinas. Pilit kasing sinasabi ng China na tama ang kanilang mga hakbang sa South China Sea hanggang sa West Philippine Sea at hindi rin papayag ang Pilipinas na tawaging lehitimo at tama ang pangbubully at pang-aagaw ng China ng mga teritoryo at nasasakupan ng ating bansa. Dito na binigyang ng leksyon Commodore Tarriela, ang retiradong kapitan ng People's Liberation Army Navy. Inamin ng mga eksperto na bukod tanging Pilipinas lang sa mga bansa na miyembro ng ASEAN ang tumatayo laban sa agresyon, pangbubully at panggigipit ng China sa karagatan at maging sa mga himpapawid ng South China Sea at West Philippine Sea.
Despite some, maybe you just mentioned that the China is aggressive or a bully to Philippines, but from Chinese policy, and I think from the 2012, and China didn't do some very more aggression or operation in the South China Sea, because all this status quo from Chinese side is maintained. There's no more island building and there's no more island occupation, but from the Philippine side, there's more and more military exercise with the US, with Japan, with the Australian foreigner. Just 1 year, that 500 times military joined the exercise with the US in the Philippines. Wow, it's a huge number. And if you trace the US surveillance and reconnaissance airplane in the South China Sea, I can tell you the 1 year is 1,200 times. So all this operation, I don't think can bring the very good atmosphere to solve the South China Sea dispute. And why the Philippines and the extra president, so we have a very good relationship and to solve the dispute and set aside the dispute and just promote the economic development. So why something have changed? Because 2 years ago. So if we just sitting here tonight to talk about the future to solving the South China Sea dispute, and we must tracing back the history and not just cast China as an adversary.
Let us first correct some of the statements that you said. Starting 2012 onwards, the Philippines never occupied any maritime features since we signed the 2002 DOC. And let me refresh your history. In 1992, when the US bases left the Philippines, 3 years after that, you took over Mischief Reef. That is the reason why the Estrada administration during that time had run aground a commissioned vessel, BRP Sierra Madre in Ayungin. Because there was also an intelligence report that it's not just in Mischief Reef that you will end your occupation, it will actually crawl in other different maritime features. Fast forward in 2012, there was a standoff when the PLA maritime forces never want the Philippine Navy to arrest your illegal fishermen who are capturing endangered species in Bajo de Masinloc. From 2012 onwards, the Chinese Coast Guard and Maritime Forces never left there, wherein you continuously and persistently harass Filipino fishermen. You said about data wherein we had a lot of engagement with the United States military, but let me refresh your memory during the time of the former administration. From 2016 to 2022, during the time of the former administration, in his first few days in office, he was not actually a fan of a military exercise with that of the US government. So meaning, there is a substantial decrease of number, if not nil, with our engagement with the US military. But despite of our good intention of sincere diplomacy under President Duterte, going to Xi Jinping, discussing about resolving our disputes, we have been still receiving reports from ordinary Filipino fishermen that they are continuously being harassed. Our supply operations remains to be very difficult for the Armed Forces of the Philippines, and our small Coast Guard vessels, which is almost triple the size of a China Coast Guard vessel, is also continuously being bullied since then and now, since during the day one that it was delivered from Japan. The Philippine government has always showed signs of good intentions and good faith. We never provoke anyone. We never wanted to escalate the tension. Coast Guard vessels in the Philippines are so small compared to the Chinese Coast Guard. I came from a South China Sea conference in Vietnam, and there is this, I won't mention the nationality of one of the panel members that I had, and he said that the Philippines is the only country in Southeast Asia who is standing up against China in the entire South China Sea. He admitted the fact that among the Southeast Asian countries, it is only the Philippines who is standing up against bullying and lawful activities of the People's Republic of China.
So South China Sea is not a problem of 5 countries, 5 claimants, and China. It's this problem of ASEAN as a whole. Why? Because you look at ASEAN Charter, especially Article 2 and Article 1, it says that ASEAN has the responsibilities as a whole to protect the peace, security, and stability of ASEAN region. And South China Sea is the ASEAN region.
I think there are several layers to unpack. One, I can completely understand the frustration that's been voiced by the Commodore and the Philippines in general. I think, though, that every country has chosen to respond to various levels and intensities of harassment in their own way, and that might not be satisfactory for the Philippines or for other countries. But I think to say that the problem has been ignored might be a little unfair to some of these countries and the efforts behind the scenes. For now, the Philippines has had probably the most confrontations with China. And I think there is a sentiment that the Philippines is unfairly sharing this burden or carrying this burden on behalf of the other ASEAN claimants. The other layer to this, of course, is that, as our Vietnamese colleague said, this is not an ASEAN-China issue. This is also an intra-ASEAN overlap. And so we have amongst ourselves, within the ASEAN claimant family, our own unresolved disputes and delimitation exercises that need to be carried out. Those have not been resolved completely. I mean, to be honest, like Malaysia and the Philippines, we still have issues in terms of our borders.
The problem in the South China Sea, the reason why there is an escalation of tension, it's because there are some countries who choose to interpret it differently. They have an alternative interpretation of each provision of each articles in UNCLOS. And at the same time, it is also coupled with their own capability, whether economically, whether militarily, and that is the problem. If you believe on your own interpretation without actually respecting the provisions of international law, that would definitely result to the escalation of tension.
Laban Pinas.